Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Anxious Lad podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Matt Keenan, and as always, you're very welcome. Joining me in the virtual Anxious Lad studio this evening is the Badass Counsellor himself, Sven Erlandson. Sven, how are you doing?
I feel like $1 million, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
No, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. I really do. It's an absolute pleasure to have you, mate. So you're very, very welcome.
Thank you.
So for anyone living under a rock for the last wee while who doesn't know who Sven is, so Sven is the creator man behind Badass Counselling. I think, Sven, I'd like to get you just, I guess, give a brief intro into what Badass Counselling is, what it's about, kind of your experiences there as well then.
Sure. I have basically 2 or 3 major careers in my past. I'm 55, and over the course of my adulthood, I spent about 15 to 18 years off and on in ministry. I'm a former Lutheran pastor. My father was clergy, 4 of my uncles were clergy, etc. And so I grew up in that environment, and my parents were World War II generation, so it was a very positive sort of religious home, not the crazy shit. And anyway, but when I first came out of high school, I went to U.S. Air Force Academy, which is where the U.S. Air Force breeds most of its pilots. And I was all set to go that direction, took the hard turn, went into ministry. And then for a while when I was in ministry, I was also a national collegiate strength coach. And so it's sort of, my life has sort of been the fusion of the spiritual, of the intense athletic side and so forth. And then I had a really random occurrence when my first wife and I were divorcing, and her father, who did not like me much, I was in my 20s, he said, Sven, I don't like you, which, that's always a great start to any conversation. And he said, but you have a gift, and I have a friend who needs your gift, and I'm wondering if you'd talk to him. And well, my ex-wife's father was a very, 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 very heavy hitter in finance in the United States, New York Stock Exchange, etc. And he introduced me to his friend, and I ended up counseling him and so on and so forth. And that was birthed sort of my corporate counseling, working very privately with CEOs, presidents. And that grew very, very slowly over the next 25 years. While I was sort of phasing out ministry, I was writing books, etc. And then the Badass Counselling I was counseling so many people. And the Badass Counselling was sort of, I'd grown up in a family of 6 boys. Well, one of them was a girl, but she was one of the boys. So it's like, and religion, even though we all loved Dad and his churches and the people and so forth, it wasn't working for us. There was something missing. We loved the spiritual side, but not the religious side. And as guys, one of my brothers enlisted during the Vietnam War, for fuck's sake, all right? So, my brothers are, some pretty tough guys, but good guys, right? Big heart.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to find an answer and seeing, especially in America, I can't speak for Ireland or the other countries. I know you're in a billion countries around the world there, Matt, but at least in the United States, there's very much the belief that, men don't talk about their problems and just be fucking tough and all that bullshit. And it wasn't working. I knew it wasn't working. And my mother, she taught at the graduate level, and she in the field of early childhood development. That ended up being one of my specialties too. And what I began to see more and more is that the root of adult problems, I believe this very strongly. All of my work, the linchpin of all of my work is that all of adult problems go back to childhood. I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
And so if a person does not have an avenue for getting the pain, the fears, and the bullshit beliefs they were taught about themselves, and that's the most critical piece. If they're not allowed to get all of that out, that's going to fuck up their lives. It's going to fuck up their relationships, their career trajectories, their view on themselves, etc. And part of the problem as men that makes it even worse as boys is generally there's no avenue for talking about it. We're not talking about problems. Your boy, fucking toughen up. Oh, you want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about. All that bullshit. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. As you know, you do your
absolutely.
shit. I mean, what's your reason? What's your reason for doing what you do?
For doing the podcast now.
Podcast and so forth.
Yeah. Well, it's
what's the problem that you're trying to solve, Matt?
It's to highlight men's mental health. It's to get lads talking. My tagline on everything I post now, the tagline on the Anxious Lad logo is "Start talking, lads." I mean, we have a thing in society, don't we, that we have to be tough, we have to man up, we have to be strong, that kind of stuff, right? So that kind of forces us then to go into ourselves and not show a feminine side, as it were, and not show our emotions, not show our feelings. But for me, it's, you know, if you can be a strong man and still talk about your feelings and still talk about what's going on with you, you know, because I think what happens is, you've quite rightly said, something at a very young age can happen. And for me, it genuinely was. I mean, I've done a lot of, I guess, growth work over the last 18 months. We spoke really briefly before we hit the record button. And for me, I did something a few weeks ago, like this bit of hypnotherapy, CBT, NLP, that kind of stuff. And a lot of my anxiety grows from when I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
I suffered with nightmares for years. I didn't sleep properly for 20, 30 years. So it comes back there. But then, as you say, then when you become an adult and a man and you're trying to deal with that shit in life then as a grown-up, you've all of this pepped up anger, and it's only going to come out in one way, you know, it's only going to come out in anger. And as men, I think that's socially acceptable aggression, isn't it?
To some degree, yeah.
But for men, showing a weak side or showing I say that like showing a weak side is not socially acceptable. So, and I guess one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was from some of your videos, right? And we have these societal expectations of men that we have to be this alpha male, we have to be this strong person who doesn't show emotion, who, you know, does all the things that men are supposed to do. And one of those is not talk. Mm-hmm. Where do we learn that from, or where do we not learn it from? I guess the other way of putting it. What's your kind of view on that social aspect of it?
That's really, that cuts to the heart of the problem. That's really an excellent question. And the cliche is that society teaches us that. And there's truth to that. That's what's sold and so forth. And just as a brief aside before I answer your question, the reason I named my company, you know, decades ago, Badass Counselling, is because I believe that a true badass, I mean, in the purest sense, and I know we're, basically does what the fuck he wants when he wants, okay? So if we assume that that's what a badass is, that lives his own fucking life, doing what feels right to him, then if that's true, then this utterly arbitrary notion of what a man is, that you're always tough, well, wait, I didn't choose that. That's not me, because you know what? When my dog of 12 years dies, I'm fucking sad. And any guy who loves his dogs knows he's going to fucking cry when his favorite fucking hound passes away. You're going to fucking cry.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, but wait a minute. I thought men don't cry. Well, fuck that. I have a reason. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. That it's a very natural human response to cry, to get angry, to be frustrated. And what do? We talk with our buddies, or we talk with our wife more often than not, or whatever. And so we get it out. I need to talk about this, whatever. So this arbitrary notion that this is what a man is, well, that's not being a badass. If I conform to that, if I conform to what society says, or a father says, or whatever says a man should be, then technically I'm not a badass, because I'm operating on someone else's definition.
Yeah.
If you're a real badass, you're just doing what the fuck you want. So, for instance, with me, do I cry? Oh, fuck yeah, man. Do I express weakness? Do I talk about my vulnerabilities, my failures? Do I admit when I'm wrong? Absolutely. Do I? If I've hurt someone, I'm the first motherfucker to go and say, listen, you know what? I hurt you, and that is so wrong, and I'm so fucking sorry, and there's no excuse. That sort of thing. A true badass is someone who is just being what they feel in the moment, doing what's right for them, rather than having something imposed on them. So, with that being said, back to your question. You had said, so where the fuck does this come from? Is it society, or what is it? Again, the cliche is that society teaches us that, and that's true. And if it were true, then, that the reason men, keep it all inside, and by the way, I like your tagline. You said start talking. That implies that no one's talking, and we have to just fucking start. That's how bad the fucking problem is. So I love the verb that you put on there. Anyway, I think that's the verb. Talking would be the verb. Start, yeah, that's a verb. It's a double verb. Anyway, not the point. Nobody gives a shit, except my silly mind. Anyway, the point is this. If society were the cause of men keeping everything in, then it would stand to reason that every man in society would be keeping their shit in. But that means I only have to come up with one person to disprove that theory.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
I believe, and I know plenty of guys within my own home, we were raised, even by my father. My father tried to sneak into World War II when he was 17 in early 1944 or early 1945 before victory was declared. He was trying to sneak in and he couldn't get in. All right. So yeah, kind of a badass, right? Grew up way up in northern Minnesota. It's fucking, 30 below and he's teaming up the horses at 5 in the fucking morning behind the sleigh, shit like that, real hardcore shit at 10 years old, 8 years old, whatever. And so my point is, but he and my mother both believed in the importance of getting feelings out. Now, was he the type that cried at every last thing? No, but he never, ever discouraged us kids. He encouraged it, and encouraged the sharing of feelings. And so that implies that even though I was getting the exact same messages in society growing up in the 60s and 70s, the exact same messages as everyone else, the message I was getting at home was overriding to a large degree, not entirely, and I was embracing some of what society was saying, was overriding it. And see, this is the thing. I am an absolute believer that there's no power in a child's life. No power, especially for that first 10 to 12 years. There is no power in a child's life greater than whoever the fuck is raising him, usually mom and dad, or mom and mom, dad and dad, usually the parent.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a grandparent, maybe being raised by your uncle, so there are those exceptions. But the bottom line is there's no one more powerful. And the truth is we are always defining ourselves against or in light of a parent, which is why so much revolution in a person's life comes in their mid to late 30s. For some reason, that's when we begin to reflect on, well, who am I and where did I come from? Do some people do it sooner? Yes. For some, is it much later? Yes. But I'm an absolute believer that the parent wields extraordinary power, and not just in, I can punish you or you need to do what I say, but in terms of the underlying messages, and this is what I was mentioning earlier, that it's not just the pain that's inflicted on the little boy or the little girl. There are plenty of tough girls that I've counseled, women, tough as hell, who were getting the same fucking message growing up, all right? And not just from fathers, often from mothers. I'll give you something to cry about, you little bitch. Shit like that. I've heard it all. Right. I mean, it's funny, but it's horrible, right? Okay, so anyway, it's not just getting out the pain and the fears, but the core beliefs, the bullshit beliefs we're taught about ourselves, and those are often not the explicit messages we're getting from the power sources, the external power sources in our life, but it's the implicit, the underlying messages, the message behind the message. And that's what's pressing that in. So it's, what are the messages the child is getting from the parents? And the truth is, one of the things that people hate nowadays is this phrase, a lot of people hate, all these kids, these fucking millennials, they all need safe space and shit like that. And all the tough guy men are like, that's for pussies, fuck that. But the truth is, so you're decrying safe space. You're saying it's fucking stupid. And yet, buddy, and I don't mean you, Matt, I mean tough guy saying this shit. Yeah. And yet, Jim, you won't talk to your fucking anybody about what's going on inside you. And why is that? Probably because maybe you talk to your wife. Maybe you have one buddy that you talk to about your shit. Why is it only one buddy? Because other people are judgmental fucks. So you're admitting then that you have a safe space with that one buddy, Steve, that you can fucking talk to. Or you feel safe and not judged by your fucking girlfriend. So don't say, safe space is for pussies. You're living the exact same goddamn thing. It's just like the hypocrisy of the judgmental fuckers from my generation putting down these young ones. It's like, anyway, bottom line is, no, I think family is infinitely more powerful. I'm not saying society doesn't play a role. But I'm saying the power wielded by the parent is extraordinary. It goes beyond any other power, with obvious exceptions, again, if you're being raised by a grandparent or something. But then here's what happens. Man. So that kid now, once they've gone through to 10, 12 years old, roughly 13, and that's when a child naturally does what? Begins to differentiate a bit from the parent and cleave to the friends, the peer groups. And alternate adult power sources, influence, mentors, coaches, that sort of thing, teachers. And it can happen sooner, but very often it's around puberty that we begin to differentiate. And so then there are other sources coming in. But very often, I've done TikToks on this and videos and blah, 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 that what we end up choosing in our new friendships, in our adult role models, is what has already been normalized or we're used to from all the previous or the significant previous relationships. In other words, I just did a video on red flags in relationships and why people don't see fucking red flags. Totally different from what we're talking about here. But it relates. Yeah, we choose people. We don't see the red flags because we've been conditioned to believe, based on how we were raised, oh, being treated shitty, being put down, or someone never apologizing to me, that's just normal. That's not a red flag. That's fucking normal. So in other words, we're choosing someone that perpetuates the very belief systems that we grew up in because we grew up being taught this was fucking normal. So then I'm choosing peer groups and I'm choosing mentors that are just as bad and just as toxic as the original power source in my life. And this goes on and on and on until the pain gets bad enough. Sometimes that can be at 19. Sometimes it doesn't come till 59. But, and I'm a big believer that change won't occur until the pain gets bad enough. Personally, again, to make a short story very long, yes, I am absolutely of the belief that it's family above all else, parents in particular.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually you say that, right? Because it's certainly about, when you go out into your peer groups and into your, teenage years, your formidable years, and you start looking at, different teachers in school or mentors or anything like that, and you almost, as you say, you take that conditioned way of living you've had up until then, and without really understanding it or really recognizing it, you're just going down the exact same path, and you're taking all of that stuff. And it's like, as you say, the parent obviously does have a role to play, absolutely. And then I think we inevitably then automatically start doing it in society to a certain degree. Oh, yeah. Like I had a conversation earlier with a guy saying something similar about, and I was guilty of it. Like, I used to live in London. My son, when he was younger, he was 6-7 years of age, I was coaching his football team. Real football now, not that American football stuff. But every now and then one of the kids would get a tackle, they'd bang into each other, they'd get a smack, he'd be on it, and there's a physical pain and there's a few tears and he's crying, and I'd have to run onto the pitch with the magic sponge and the water, make him feel he's okay and that kind of stuff. But without realising, I'm squirting the water in his face and doing that to him. Don't show you're crying. And it's only now years later I'm looking at that going, what the hell was I doing? Do you know what I mean? And I think, there is an element that we're all guilty to a certain degree of that. But as you say, we're told it's societal expectations, it's societal norms, it's what society teaches us to do. But as you say, it actually starts earlier than that, and it starts in the home. And one of the other videos, and as we're talking about starting in the home, one of the other videos I loved that you did was the one where you're talking about bringing your son around the supermarket, and he catches his finger in the trolley. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that one quickly, just to,
sure,
I guess,
sure.
Just to hammer that point home about what it is we should be doing as parents?
Yes, and to your point, when we're parenting, most people aren't necessarily, now from the parent perspective, parenting based on what society says. We're generally parenting based off of how we were parented, and we're either basically doing in lockstep what my parents and all the other parents of their generation did, or I'm just going to do the fucking opposite. So it's either one extreme or the other, neither of which is good. There's no deliberateness. Okay, so that being said, I was 23, my wife was 24 when we first got married, and we've been divorced for years. We get along fine now, but when we first got married, I said to my wife, one of the things that I took from my growing up that we are going to do is anytime our son and then our daughter after that gets hurt, we're going to stop whatever we're doing to the degree it's feasible. If we're going down a highway, we'll deal with it when we stop. So already we're teaching them just, let it out now, but we're going to, deal with it better when we stop or at the end of the school day. But I said, we're just going to stop whatever we're doing. And if I got to be late to my fucking meeting, I got to be late to my fucking meeting. And we're going to let the child get it out. And the reason we're going to do that is because I was at that age, fortunately, and I was taught this from parents. I know that the body stores pain. So pain that doesn't get released stores in the body. Well, you add up enough of that fucking pain, and it's going to begin to eat away at the person. Physical health, mental health, relationships, etc. So we're in the fucking grocery store, and his fucking finger gets caught in the cart, or the trolley, as you call it. And motherfucker starts screaming, right? And I mean, I've done that before. Who hasn't done that in one way or another, right? He's howling, and I pull him out of there, and he showed me his finger. And I say, let it out. Let it out. And of course, people are looking at me, and there's some who are very sympathetic and have kind eyes, and they're sort of looking at me like, oh, you poor dad, I understand. And other people are like, oh, take your kid outside. And I don't give a shit. Fuck you. And it's like, get over it. We're not in a fucking airplane where we're trapped at 30,000 feet. Fuck off. Anyway, but even if we were, people, anyway. And he's crying. He's howling. And I said, let it out, sweetheart. You're doing great. And he kept going. And then minute two later, it's from wailing, it's down to sort of crying or sobbing. Then it's down to crying, and then a little more of that. Come on, sweetheart, keep going. Then it gets down to sort of whimpering. Right? He's not wailing anymore. He's whimpering. He's flushing. It's like, come on, you're doing great. I'm proud of you. Keep letting it out. And he's letting it out. And then it goes from whimpering. And this is why I told my wife that before we got married, before we had kids, because it went from wailing to crying, sobbing, to whimpering, and now it goes down to sniffles. And then it goes down to looking around. And I said, no, don't stop. Come on, let it out. And he looks me dead in the face, square in the eye, this little fucking peckerhead 3-year-old kid. And he says, but Papa, I'm done. He wiggles out of my arms, and he goes to try to find a box of sugared cereal of some shit to, corrupt his teeth. But the point is, he was allowed to flush it out.
Yeah.
And then people ask, well, my kid will have a tantrum and they'll milk that shit. The reason children are having tantrums beyond purging out the pain. So what my son engaged in was a natural process. Probably took 5 minutes, if that, 4 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
If a child is, let's say, milking it or crying all the time or something like that, it's not because they've been allowed to express their feelings, because express means in Latin to push out. Once they've pushed out the feelings, why would a child continue to cry or continue to be angry? Why? Because that child's love cup at other times throughout his life, in life, day to day, week to week, is not getting enough love, attention, kindness, affection poured into his love cup. So the child fundamentally has basically two fucking tools for getting that attention, for getting some love. And not just physical affection, but the kind words and so forth. Crying and yelling. Crying and tantrums, right? So if a kid is milking it and going beyond, just the physical pain, they're doing it because their needs aren't being met. And I hate to be a fucking asshole, but that's on the parent. Your child is conveying in the only fucking way a fucking 3-year-old or 6-year-old knows how, and that is to cry and yell because he's not getting his needs met. He needs more love. And the more you do it, and in kindly, rather than you're a pain in the ass, stop it, make it go away. Right? If I'm actually stopping and being present to the child and giving the love, slowly but surely, I'm filling that love cup till eventually they're not milking it anymore. Furthermore, what the child is learning then, I told you, if I'm on the highway, I can't pull over right away. So the child learns to delay, or they'll let some of it out and then we'll get it out. Or when they're at school, they'll naturally delay. I mean, sure, in the moment, if I skin my knee, if I skin my knee now, walking down, my back patio, I'll get up and I'll, fuck, and a couple of fucking tears, and I'll have blood coming out my fucking 55-year-old arms. I'll drop a tear or two. So it's only natural a kid would. And if they're allowed to get some of it out, they can flush out the rest later. But it's when they're forced to keep it in. That's when the fucking problems rise. And it gets especially worse in those teen years because now we've upped the ante. The stakes are higher, right? Now I'm in love with the girl and the girl fucking left me, right? Or, she's flirting with my good friend, Tom. And it hurts and I'm getting stirred up in all my feelings. If I'm not given an avenue for those feel much bigger than, maybe the stuff did back when you were 8. And so that shit builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And that's where young men get the fucking rage. I mean, you brought up mass murders earlier. And it's not just that they're male. They're fucking American. I mean, let's be honest. Not all of them. But Jesus Christ, we got a fucking parenting pandemic in our fucking country. And it's this shit. It's the pain, the fears, and the bullshit beliefs that are building up so much that it just pours out in bad ways.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I think I'm kind of living proof of that. I mean, speak to my kids, speak to my wife. They'll tell you there was a time there for a while that I was just angry. Do you know what I mean? It was just like I'd snap. I'd turn on a sixpence. 1 minute everything's happy, and then boom, there's an argument, or there's a screaming match, or there's whatever. And it was only when, as you say, it gets to a point when it's too much, where the body reacts. And I think from a physical perspective, it didn't. I mean, maybe the sleep obviously was a sign of it as well.
Sure.
I mean, there was no physical pain in it or whatever, but it got to a point during the lockdowns, working from home, confined to your house. We weren't able to go more than 2 or 3 kilometers from our front door at one point during the lockdowns here, so they were quite severe. So I think growing up being full of anxiety but never really knowing that's what it was, and then being thrown into that lockdown scenario, it all just came to a head at that point. And I talk about this in the first episode, where I literally just dropped to the floor in tears, in floods of tears, and screaming at my wife and kids, I don't know what's wrong with me,
Well, and Matt,
and that kind of.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to. I guess that was the beginning of my understanding what mental health actually was, and the real implications of what it can do to somebody. We'll fast forward then over a few months, and again, I talk about it in one of the other episodes. I was misdiagnosed by the doctor. I was put on medication that I shouldn't have been put on. There was suicidal thoughts in there as well, and I think for me that was the big turning point and why I started the podcast then, because for that scared the shit out of me. I'm driving down one of the motorways here, and I can see the steel guard on the side of the road, and I had it picked out. Like, yeah, that's the one I'm going to drive into that one of these days, and that scared the shit out of me. And I think, again, like from a male perspective, there's a correlation here, isn't there? Because we don't talk about our mental health, we don't express how we're feeling, we don't let it out, we barely talk to friends, but yet we make up 75-78% of the global suicide rate.
Right.
And whereas
I wonder if there's a fucking correlation.
Do you know what I mean? And for me, that's the whole point of it. And that's why the podcast is here, is to try and bring that number down. And that's why my tagline is "Start Talking," because it all starts with a conversation in my mind.
And here's the thing that, in my work is that I tell people is that for males, but it's not just males. There are a fucking lot of women who are high-powered, strong, fierce women, whether they're mothers or corporate executives or whatever they are, athletes who have been raised with the same tough guy bullshit that us guys have been raised with. But here's the thing. The reason guys don't get the help until there's a full fucking breakdown, or until they're just fucking raging on everyone all the time, is because we've been conditioned to believe that I am not justified in expressing my feelings when they're small. I'm not justified, or they don't matter, or they're not important. I'm not justified when they're medium. You just got to be rational. You got to be logical and just even keel. Maybe you can have some anger now and then, but it's not until it grows, and it grows from accumulated shit, but also new stimuli based on a life that really isn't even fucking making me happy to begin with, or it's just full of my own clutter, until it gets big, big, big. Then we feel justified. When I was younger, I used to say, well, I have a very long fuse. But if you push me long enough and hard enough, eventually I will engage, and you don't want me to engage. All right, because we don't feel justified in the small things. Well, now let's take that, and we think about like anger, and where someone's pissed me off or someone's hurt me, and it's not until it gets really big that we finally blow up at them, or in your case, you finally shut down. And in my books and in my podcasts and so forth, one of the fundamental premises that I tell people is change will not occur until the pain gets bad enough.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why a lot of guys have to fucking implode before they ever seek to fucking change. But here's the other side of the problem with regard to men thinking small feelings don't matter. We see the effect of that also on a very different angle, not just the anger, but over here in love relationships. So many guys live inauthentic relationships, live inauthentically in their relationships, because they're not saying, when I'm feeling hurt. They're not saying, I really don't want to do that. Or they're not saying, maybe it's the other type of guy who says, I want to do this. So many of us guys are conditioned to serve, serve, serve. I was just in a counseling session last night with a U.S. war veteran. He did 5 tours during Iraq and Afghanistan. At one point, he got blown up. No lie.
Jesus.
And, oh yeah. And he can only talk with one of his very closest friends. about his shit and so forth. But it wasn't until everything got out of control that he finally gave himself permission and began, to your point, talking. And so the point is, we're not being authentic in our relationships when we're withholding our authentic self. And this is a guy, tough guy. And so he's not authentic in his relationships. Why? Because he's not expressing his feelings. He feels conditioned his whole life to take care of everyone else. Take care of everyone else.
Yeah,
so he's afraid, really, to put his wants and his needs out there in a relationship, because if I'm not just serving you, you may not like me. You may not love me. And so what we're seeing, the theme in both of these things, is this notion of not expressing my truth, my feelings, when they're small or even when they're medium, that we wait for it to build up. And that's a problem, not just with regard to anger. It's a problem with regard to love. It's a problem with regard to living authentically. It's a problem with regard to creating a life that creates joy for me. And if I'm not willing to say in my journey in life, whether it's in my career or my home or whatever, what doesn't fit for me, if I'm not willing to express that, then I'm going to get down the road. And, the way I was raised, my parents, World War II generation, pack up your troubles in the old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. That was, World War I, but it carried through to World War II. Look on the sunny side of life. And so I was raised in this very positive mentality ethos in our home. And it was basically taught, hey, make the best of it. Or this isn't so bad, or find the good.
Yeah.
And I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that, and find the good in anything, till eventually you get down the road and you realize, yeah, I can find the good in everything around me right now, but I don't actually want any of this. So finding the good is great. And I like that I was taught that. But it's so easy, if I'm not tuned into what's going on inside of me, it's so easy to construct a life that does not reflect who I am, my wants, my needs, what feels good to me, and rejecting that which doesn't. And we're taught as guys, we're taught don't feel the feelings. Well, if you don't feel your feelings, then how the fuck are you going to create a life that reflects who you really are? Furthermore, how are you going to be a viable member of society and not just turn into a fucking dickhead? So anyway, that's that.
No, but you're absolutely right. And I think there's such a, what's the word I'm looking for? There's such a contradiction in terms with men, right, when it comes to mental health, right? Because on the one side, and again, I said this a couple of times, on the one side, we're fixers, right? We want to fix things, right? We just want to get shit done, right? I'll use my wife for an example. She could have a shit day in work. She comes home, she's venting. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, what if he did this? What if he did that? What if he did that? Right? Because I'm trying to fix it, right? No, because you know where this is going, right?
Right.
So, and I'm like, well, what if he did? She's like, just shut up. I don't want you to fix it. Just shut up and listen. I'm fixing it in my head. You just shush. But we try to fix it. We want to always fix things. We want to, there's stuff around the house needs to get done. So we want to fix. We take all of that work on. We try and fix everything. Whatever it is, we try and fix it. Mm-hmm. We know there's something wrong with us inside. We know we're not feeling great. We know we're feeling anxious, depressed, whatever the case is, stressed out to the fucking max. But we don't do anything to fix it. Now, that's the contradiction in that I don't really get. And for me, it was the exact same. We tell everyone we're fine. I'm fine. You always see those stupid memes going around, or stupid TikTok videos, when the wife says she's fine, run kind of thing, but we're worse for that. Do you know what I mean? I think men are worse for that using that phrase, I'm fine, because genuinely we're not. Genuinely, there's something going on.
That's right. And so that begs the obvious question of, and this is how I operate in all of my thinking. My clients have heard me say it a million times, that if you're ever trying to figure out why someone's doing something that doesn't make sense, always ask yourself the question, what's the primary fear driving the behavior? Speculate a bunch of answers and then go with the biggest, hairiest, scariest one. So if men have a fix-it code written into their hard drive, as so many men do, okay? And again, a lot of women too, but if they have that fix-it mentality, then what would cause them in certain situations to shift out of fix-it and move into a sort of a rejection of the fix, or to not fix, or to become passive? Why would someone change their internal operation, go against the code written in them, unless there was an override switch that in certain situations you don't fix? Well, what would be the fear driving a man to not want to fix? Well, fixing your feelings, fixing your internal shit, even though you know shit is off, would require admitting there's a problem, admitting there's something wrong with me. Okay, Well, we already know one of the things men hate is, pride. I got to be perceived as, and here's the second thing, strong.
Yeah.
That there is an override of fix it. There is a even more powerful code written in even more into your hard drive, and that is don't appear weak. That is always be strong, always be strong, always be strong. Well, if you're going to go into fix-it mode, we only fix things that are broken, or we fix things that aren't functioning properly or that need help, right?
Yeah.
And then to fix his own self, first of all, with his wife and especially with his kids, you got to get the fuck out of fix-it. And I don't mean you, I just mean us guys in general. You got to get out of fix-it mode because you're making it worse. Because if I'm trying to fix you, I'm fundamentally saying to you, there's something wrong with you. So my underlying message is there's something wrong with you, to which a guy I might be saying this to says, well, my wife is admitting there's something wrong. Right, but the last thing she wants is confirmation of the message inside of her that there's something wrong. Furthermore, by flushing out all the pain and all the stuff going on in this situation, very often we see our own solution very, very clearly. A solution will actually solve itself. People will actually find their own fix if they're simply allowed to burn off all the crud, all the dross, all the feelings, etc. Okay, but back to this. Why would guys not then fix themselves? And I don't know of many, if any, maybe one, drives in a male greater than wanting to, keeping up appearances and appearing strong. And even bigger than that, the fear is to not appear weak and like you have your shit together. And so this veteran that I was talking to yesterday, until it's very hard, it's been very hard in his transition to allow himself to get help, to trust another person. And part of the trust is trusting that you won't look down on me, right? And so the override that causes men to not fix is the fear of looking weak, and that fear then that you won't respect me, and that I lose some of my manhood. And I don't mean the manhood down between my legs. Right. That I lose my sense of identity, my sense of self, my sense of being a man by seeking help. And so I'm just going to power through and be tough. And this gets to another one of my core theories, and that is the soul is more powerful than the will. I deal with people who are extraordinarily successful in the U.S., around the world, who in whatever their career field, from politics to music to business to finance to all sorts of shit. And why the fuck would they be coming to me? These extraordinary people who have built incredible edifices, sort of bespeaking their success in massive, colossal amounts of money, then what the fuck would they need me for? If they have such strong willpower and such brilliance, why? Because all the shit that they bought into, this, American dream, I want to have it all, blah, 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 that bullshit, in the end didn't fill the hole that those things were supposed to fill. And so they got this pain inside, and so then they come to me, and what we discover is that all the willpower, eventually your soul, the shit that got pressed into the wet cement of your soul back in childhood, those messages, that they're still running, and eventually your soul drags you down from the inside, overpowers your own will, shuts the whole system down and says, this is not who we are. The soul, who you are, what's written in the code, on the chip inside of you, so to speak, is not being expressed in life. And that's why the fucking misery exists. And so that soul eventually shuts down, overpowers the will over time. And what we see is that even all the strength, and see, this is all the strength isn't enough. And this is why this self-help shit among men, it's an old man's game. It's an old man's game. These fucking 20-year-olds listening to the latest UFC fighter or listening to the latest fucking, tough guy bullshit. Oh, I'll just power through. It's just like, oh, you dumb fucking snot. I used to think the same shit when I was 20, right? I was going to be a fighter. Fuck it, I can do it. And you got to get your ass kicked by life, by a woman, by careers, by all sorts of, and then have that same kid who's been carrying that pain from his childhood, and he's carrying it at 20, but he thinks he can power through. Well, now he's 40, and he's been carrying that same fucking pain for 20 more years. Well, that pain over 20 more years, oh, that'll fucking drag your ass down, right? I mean, it's like making going into massive debt when you're 20. Well, now you've got this massive debt with the, interest accruing on it, right? Now, how much greater is that debt and the accrued interest going to be over fucking 20 years? Now you've not only got the debt and X amount of interest, you've got that debt and the compounded interest working against you. It's the same way with internal pain. And that's why this sort of shit that we're doing, the real success is if we can inch that back. So it's not just the 35-year-olds and the 50-year-olds, men, who are realizing the need for it. But we're inching it backwards to the 25-year-olds, to the 22-year-olds, to the 18-year-olds, and eventually we're getting it back to the 8-year-olds and the 4-year-olds. Because the truth is, you're going to waste a fuck ton of life. One of the single biggest things I've seen, and then I want to let you go here or let you talk for a second, but one of the single biggest things I see in people that I work with, once they've begun the healing process and begin to be enlightened and begin to shed old Matt, old Sven, and they shed it and they're breaking into their new self. One of the laments that I hear is in sort of a wistful spirit. They say, God damn, I wish I would have learned this shit 20 years ago. I feel like I wasted 20 fucking years. Or I feel like I wasted, 15 or 30 years. I wish I would have. Exactly. And so that's why when I get these youngsters coming to me at 20 or whatever, and they're just dragged down. And one of the things I say is, you have no idea how fortunate you are. If you choose to do the work rather than just stuffing all that shit back down, if you do the work, you have no idea. I could line up a fucking 200 fucking 40-year-olds and 55-year-olds who would look you in the face and say, kid, you are so blessed that the gods are kicking your ass now. Because you don't waste 20 fucking years on a career you hate, or in a relationship that fucking kills you, or, make your kids' first 10 years of their lives really, really fucking hard. You're good to get it now. And that's what you're doing in your work, whether you're aware of it or not, is we're inching that backward of when men come to the awareness of, it's not good enough to just be willpower and tough. I got to get this shit out so I can become a better person. And that's why I admire what you're doing in focusing on the man. I really admire you for that, man.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. But I think that's the thing, though, isn't it? And that's kind of the whole point of why I kind of started this. Look, I've got a son. I've got two daughters. My eldest daughter and son are both psychology students. So those conversations are interesting now. But And they're great at it. They're great at talking. We've always had, I think, like you, like my wife and I have always had that ethos of growing up in the house, in our house, that we talk about. We have dinner every night together as a family, and shit gets talked about. We'll whatever it is. It's always an open book in our family. That's kind of the way we want to do it. But it's true though. Like for me, I was 37, 38 when it kicked me hard, and then it was like, right, I need to fucking sort this out. And exactly like you say, if I'd have known what I know now 20 years ago, or if I'd have just let it out 20 years ago, if I'd have been able to express it 20 years ago, like that, I wouldn't have been that ball of anger, that coiled spring for, the last so many years.
What was the experience like, Matt, just to interject, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but what was the experience like for you? You said you basically shut down and it's like, I got to fix this, and everything had gone to shit. What was the experience like for you in the beginning when you first had the light bulb went on that, oh shit, getting it out, I actually feel a little bit better. What was that experience like for you when you began to see the results from starting talking?
Do you know, it's a bit of a weird one because it wasn't an overnight thing. And like that, like I said, I talk about it in the second episode, actually, because I focus on therapy or medication, right? And that's kind of the basis of episode 2 of my story, say, for lack of a better expression. And for me, it was, so I had the breakdown. I'm literally on tears. My 17-year-old son picked me up off the floor, literally. Oh. I was like, right, I got to do something. So what's the first thing to do? I rang the doctor. I was like, look, I don't know what the hell is going on. He says, you've got depression, major depressive disorder. Here's some medication. And then give me a call in a month. Let me see how you're going. A month later, it wasn't really working. We had just got the keys to this new house the day I got the medication. So there was, I don't know if it was a bit of a placebo effect, the fact that I wasn't working. I was doing work on the house. I'd taken some time off to get the house ready. So there was a lot going on for those first couple of weeks. But then it started to settle. And then it was, the meds weren't really working. So it was increased and then increased. And I think I went from 37 milligrams to 200 and something milligrams in the space of 3 or 4 months. Like, it was just insane. It kept doubling up. So by the time it got to August, September time of that year, I was just a shell. There was nothing behind the eyes. I was dead behind the eyes. There was a couple more incidences in between there. So then I started the therapy. Then I started talking to my therapist and my psychotherapist. And it was getting to the point like I'd have to come home and go to bed for an hour because I was just exhausted after, of getting it out.
That's right.
Then we realised it's not depression. It's severe anxiety, or GAG, generalised anxiety disorder. And there's a lot of conditioning in there. There was a lot of learned behaviours in there. So it took me 6 months, 6 months maybe, to come off the medication that I was on, because I was on one of the stronger ones and one of the worst ones to actually come off in terms of withdrawal symptoms. So it was probably a good year, thereabouts, maybe.
And so then,
months.
it was a year. So then, again, answer the question then. So what was it when you finally began to actually see, holy shit, there are fucking results here? What was that experience like once after a year you began to actually see results?
Yeah, so I think it was, and like again, it was kind of different to that. It took a few months even after the meds were out in my system that I could actually see clearer. And once at that point, I think we were doing something around the house. It was probably something silly, and when probably my wife and kids would have expected me to snap, nothing. It was just cool. Let's go.
And what was that like for you to experience that, to see yourself not reacting? What was that like for you?
It was incredible. It was amazing, because it was kind of like, right, I can control this shit. I've got control of it. I don't have to. That's not a trigger for me now. Do you know what I mean? Whereas prior to that and prior to the therapy and stuff, and then I did a lot of. There's another guy on the episode, or on one of the episodes, Justin. He's in Arizona. He does a lot of kung fu and qigong and meditation. So he started helping me with that stuff as well. So I was doing breathing exercises. I was going into the sea here in Ireland, fucking freezing, cold water therapy. There was a lot of stuff I was doing to try and bring the anxiety down. So it was a long ass process, I guess. But even now, it's just, I'm much calmer. I sleep better. And it's like, if I'd have known half of this stuff 20 years ago, it would have been amazing. But I think the first realization of it was like, shit, there hasn't been an argument in the house in a long time. Yeah. My son even said it, like, he goes, I find Dad easier to communicate with now. The relationships between the kids and my wife is much better. So
yeah,
for anyone listening, for any young lads listening, lads, you won't power through. You won't. You're going to get to a point like I did. You're going to get to a point where
good luck with that one.
Yeah. And this isn't two old farts trying to just, the old lads are saying it. This is actual fact. You're not going to power through.
Yeah. And we did the same fucking thing that the kids, are doing now. We did the same shit when we were in our 20s. And, oh shit, I guess it doesn't work. And so, and I like what you said there. I mean, because in a way, what is changing society, and I really believe change is happening. The mere fact that you and I are on a fucking podcast, which of course didn't even exist 10 years ago, whatever, but on the radio, so to speak, or on TV like this, so to speak, and talking about this shit, that represents a shift. We're normalizing things. And so the more people see regular guys or, big ugly fuckers like me talking about shit like this and talking about the importance of it and the goodness of it, it changes people's mentality. And it just takes more time before that shit hits critical mass, And I think it's wonderful. I love how you ended that story, that it's changed your relationships with your own kids, not to mention your wife, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, as I said, for me, it was 30 odd years of conditioning, learned behaviour that I just never dealt with any shit as a kid. I was always an anxious child. But I was suppressing it for years. I didn't know how to talk about it. Didn't want to talk about it. Whatever. But it got to a point where it was too much, and it snapped. And then it's like, right, you really need to do something about it. And then, as you say, there's a realization there that, right, something needs to be fixed. in me. I need to recognize that. I need to look at it. There's a lot of soul searching that needs to be done. There's a lot of looking at your own behavior and critical analysis of your own behavior and how, you know, what you're saying, what you're doing, how you're looking at people, how you're treating people, all of that kind of stuff, and really just changing how past experiences are shaping the events that you're going through now.
Yeah, and especially how your fears are shaping. Your fears are shaping, because it's the fear of opening up, the fear of being seen as weak, the fear of what people will think. All of those fears are what's driving us to keep our feelings in. And so really, the act of opening up is an act of pushing through those fears. I mean, if you drill down, if I were to drill down with any guy, I'd do it in fucking 10 minutes. Just pester him, go down, down, down. We'll discern that at the bottom of it, at the root of why a guy is staying locked up, and again, there are plenty of women this way too, but why a guy is staying locked up is there some fear driving the behavior. So then, wait a minute. If you're giving into your fear, then by giving into the fear, you're admitting you're weak. The strong action is to say, if I'm afraid of opening up to someone, if I'm afraid of showing my feelings, and so I'm not showing the feelings, then I'm admitting that I'm acting out of fear. I'm admitting that I'm being weak. Rather than the courageous act is to push through that fear and say, yeah, I am afraid of people not liking me or looking down on me, but I don't give a shit. I want to get it out. The courageous act is getting it out, knowing that some people might look down on you. That's the courage, is getting it out. Keeping it in isn't courage. It's you giving in your motherfucking fears. If I hold, I'm afraid, and then I don't act on it, that's me giving into my fears. That's me basically wearing a big neon sign that says Sven's a pussy. Right? Versus the courageous act is put it out there, and it's like, you know, if somebody thinks I'm weak, go fuck yourself. Say it to my motherfucking face. But it's not even that. It's just like, if you think it's weak, I don't even give a shit, because I know I need this for me, and it's being a strong enough man to do what you know you need to do for your own fucking health and happiness. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, that's kind of the whole reason my tagline. You stay strong. You're not showing weakness. You're not becoming weak by doing it. You're still a strong man. You're probably a stronger man
because you're doing the hard
and talking, and you're doing the hard work, and you're getting it done. You're willing to change, and you're willing to, you know, if change is needed or if it's just fucking talking, you know, it's just getting it out there. It's changing those norms. Is it, Sven? I know you're on a tight schedule, but you've been chatting for the best part of an hour now, and it's been absolutely awesome. It really has. Before I let you go, though, any final thoughts to the guys out there, to the lads out there who are still maybe considering it, don't know how to, don't know where to begin? You do have a video on that, I think, as well, on TikTok, where you talk about what can I do, how do I change, what do I do?
I think that the biggest thing isn't just the what's and the how's. I think the bigger question is the when. And the what's and the how's, you know, I've written books. I've got this book that'll actually step you through the fucking process. There's a hole in my love cup. I've got my fucking podcast, the Badass Counselling Show, and all these free fucking TikToks that I've done. All this shit is there for free. Not the book, but everything else is there for free. So there are hows, there are tools. And I'm not the only one. There's great shit out there that I have nothing to do with that is great shit for helping men or even women, you know, get this pain out. But it's not what you need to do even. I mean, you're driving that point home. Start talking, getting it out. I believe in journaling. And there are other tools I talk about in the book. But it's the when. And the obvious answer is, well, when should men do this? And the obvious answer is, well, now. I don't agree. Well, one of the piece of work that I used to do 10, 15 years ago is I was brought into military units and police units and firefighting units and professional athletes, and I was brought in to speak. And especially when I'd be speaking with the police, they'd bring me in during their use of force week when they're doing extra training and so on and so forth. And, you know, some of the guys out on patrol and a lot, they put on some extra weight and lose their health. And, you know, so they wanted me to speak to that and so on and so forth. And I always tell people, don't start now. If you're still thinking about, should I do this, open up and start talking? Should I, connect with the group? Should I get a therapist? Should I start my exercise plan now? If you're still asking the question, should, it's not time. It's not time. You're going to force it. You're going to start something and you might quit it. Nothing wrong with quitting. I'm a big believer in quitting, right? What I tell that people is what I believe truly motivates people is fucking pain. You've waited this long, you're 35 or you're 52, you've waited this long, wait a little longer. Because this shit doesn't magically fucking heal itself. Wait until it gets so fucking bad that you reach what I call the fuck it point. And the fuck it point is where your pain of life, whether it's your internal life or your physical pain or your relationship pain or your financial pain, where it gets so fucking bad that all of a sudden, and maybe it's one day you're just at the grocery store picking up limes for your gin and tonics, or maybe it's wherever you are, using the restroom or driving to work, and you reach that fuck it point. And the fuck it point is where I realize all of a sudden today, I now finally have the courage to do what just yesterday I was terrified to do. All of a sudden now today, I have the clarity, and never undersell clarity. Wow. I have the clarity to do what just yesterday I didn't even know what to do. When the pain gets bad enough, pain is this extraordinary teacher. It's one of the most wonderful blessings in life. That when the pain gets bad enough, we get clarity, we get courage, and all of a sudden we're motivated. Do you know that the recidivism of stopping smoking is lower? In other words, people who go back to smoking is much lower among people who go cold turkey. In other words, for people who go cold turkey, and it's not all of them, obviously, there are exceptions, obviously, yeah. But where somebody reaches the point where they're so sick of smelling like cigarettes, and I used to smoke, and they're so sick of not being able to walk up a flight of stairs. They're so sick of it, they throw it out, and it's like, fuck it, I'm done. They're so fucking motivated because of all the shit, because the pain has accrued. Whereas if you're like, well, maybe I'll try it, gee, guess what you're going to fucking do? You're going to go back to fucking cigarette. Right? It's the same way with the pain of talking out. Now, I know for most people, and if for other people selling, well, start doing it now. I'm not trying to fight them. I'm not saying they're wrong and I'm right. I'm just saying what I sell is when the pain gets bad enough, trust me, it won't be a question of should I or it'll just be fuck it. I'm ready. Okay. I'm doing it fucking now. Fuck it. And so I'm a big believer in, hey, just let the pain get worse. And trust me, it will get worse. So anyway, that's all I know about that. I'm not real bright to begin with, so probably better not to listen to me.
No, that's awesome. And I think, you're right to a certain degree, though. It's going to get to a point where you're going to need to. You're going to have to, But I think
the truth is, if you're even asking the question of should I, you're in the ballpark. It's coming soon. Because 10 years ago, you weren't even asking yourself that question. So if a guy is asking it now, he's getting very, very close. And that point of the fuck it point, it's going to happen very, very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Listen, as I said, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time, buddy. I really, really do. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is completely mine, Matt. And I admire what you're doing in your work and your podcast and coaching people and so forth. I really admire you. And so I'm glad there are guys out there like you, changing the world, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. So like you said, actually, I was going to bring it up as well, but you've already held it up. So there's a hole in my love cup. You need to get, for the guys listening, jump on it, have a look. Sven's website, badasscounselling.com. There's so much resources on there. Follow him on TikTok as well. Some of his videos are incredible and eye-opening and enlightening. Like I said, one last time, Sven, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. I've enjoyed it.